Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. Hey, guys, today we are going to be talking about the Game Awards. A note from there from Sven Vincke, who is he's the guy in charge who owns Larian Studios. So I kind of wanted to talk about this because this has been a few months ago that the second time he's had a chance to talk at the Game Awards has came up, and there was a lot of talk about it, and it was all good information and what have you. I didn't really think I had a lot to add that wasn't mostly just adding to the noise. And while I do think I have some things to add at this point, I also, you know, just wanted to wait till the noise died down a bit and just kind of have um, a reminder conversation in a lot of ways to people who follow game news, but also to make aware to everybody else kind of what's a bit of what's going on in the industry. So a couple of things here, as always. My standard disclaimers: we can all disagree, guys, and still be friends. We can disagree heatedly. That's okay. But and normally I give a handful of other things. The plan is to do this stream, and then we're gonna hey Lirio, and then we're gonna also talk about Civ. 6 and 7, and these conversations kind of go together a bit. There's a handful of other things, so we'll talk about his. He said a few things at the Games Festival Awards, Indie Game Festival Awards, and then we'll move on to some Civ 6 stuff. Civ 6/7 rather. All right. Yeah, Liriel. This is just a little bit different format. And then when we go to like actually watch the videos, just I made a couple of scenes in OBS is all that's happened, so I can pop in between them. One day we'll have some cool animations when popping in between them, and we'll probably have a lot more scenes. Just trying to slowly up the quality here as we go along. I'm just gonna give everybody a few minutes to get in here, guys, because I don't. Usually it takes a little bit for everybody to see that you've gone live. So we'll just kind of run in place for just a second. For those who are watching after the fact, I'm sorry, just kind of jump ahead a bit. Yeah. It is indeed fancy. Thanks, L'Oreal. Yeah, just tried to. Oh, actually, I'm hovering in the air over here. I just realized that. Let me fix that. All right. So to give you some background on this, because I think it's pretty important. Sven here has in 2023, Larian Studios for Baldur's Gate 3 won the Game of the Year. Okay, they won the award, and I can't for the life of me. So if you notice in the top right, there's a hashtag the Game Awards. I suspect, I don't know this, but I suspect that maybe they asked people to take down the footage from that first time because I can't hardly find it anywhere. And if people reposted without adding commentary or whatever, they would be probably within their rights to have them take it down. But I do recall, because I watched it, what happened, unless this is a false memory. Sven wanted to talk about, kind of the game industry a little bit more broadly. And he was also like remembering some colleagues that had passed away during COVID. That was their COVID game. And basically he was like played off the stage, right? So he didn't get his time. Now, to the Game Awards credit, and which would really upset me if they did have people take those things down, because they did the right thing the next year. They gave him, I think, 3 minutes. They gave him some time to come up on stage and to say what he's going to say here. So this is from the 2004, which was a few months ago, or into end of last year. So obviously it's the Game Awards for the year. If they do it kind of the end of the year, makes sense. So he got a chance to say what he wanted to say. There's also another one here where he got a chance to come up and accept award for Baldur's Gate 3. Again, at a different, Independent Games Festival Awards, and he didn't have anything prepared, so he said some stuff that was off the cuff that I think was really telling. And again, just like the title says of this, the stream, I want to talk about, a lot of people when all this has happened has talked about, Larian Studios as, like, and Sven as, being like he's a unicorn, right? He's special. No one else is like him or what have you. Other people, have made like, oh, he's he's the game development god, right? Or like this is what every game developer should be like. What I am going to propose as we go through this, and I'll provide evidence for this, that in a lot of ways, while I do think Sven has some unique, interesting, and his own perspective to bring to things, um, he is really just the thing is everybody has that. Everybody has their own unique perspective and something valuable they can bring. You could argue that one person sure is more accomplished than others. Certainly we see this in sports and what have you, but I don't think Sven might be a pro if we were going to use the sports analogy, but I don't think that he is unique. And I kind of want to make that argument. Hey, Spreading Democracy, what's going on? Welcome to the stream. All right. I think enough preamble. Hopefully you guys kind of understand the history and what we're talking about here. If I haven't made anything clear, if anything becomes confusing at any point, let me know. Let me know. Drop a comment and also let me know what you guys think about this, right? As I said before, we can all have different opinions. We can all, I could be wrong about some of this, and so I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, what you think. So with that, we'll go ahead and start off here. So this is again from 2024. It's only a handful of months ago that Sven got a chance to say what he wanted to say in 2023. Let's take a look.
I realize you guys have been sitting here for over 3 hours, but I still have some time credits from last year to cash in. So it turns out.
Note all the laughter. That's what I was talking about.
That not only will I be the one who will know as first which game wins tonight, but I actually also know which game is going to win next year, the year after, and the year after. Now, how do I know this? Well, an oracle told me. She said, change is coming. It's a modern oracle, so they made me sign an NDA, but I trust all of you. I know you can keep a secret. You will never leak it. The oracle told me that the game of the year 2025 was going to be made by a studio who found the formula to make it up here on stage. It's stupidly simple, but somehow it keeps on getting lost.
I am going to pause this a lot. I lied. I always do. I think everybody gets mad at streamers for doing that. It's stupidly easy, but it keeps on getting lost. So we hear all the time from game developers that, making games is really hard. And it is. The formula, though, from someone who's been very successful, they're saying is not actually that hard. It's actually easy and it's straightforward. And it somehow people keep losing the formula. I think that is really telling, and it's nice. It's refreshing to hear because so often we try to get, we're gaslighted as gamers. It's kind of crazy into no. Sometimes it's by our fellow gamers. They did the best they could. This is the best game they could ever make, blah, 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 whatever company it is. When you're like, yeah, this is kind of disappointing. We'll talk about that later. And again, at the same time, we never want to, I'm not advocating for going to the other extreme either, right? There's a lot of room in the middle where we can all live in, where, you say, well, all game developers are bad. That's obviously ridiculous. Most people who get into game development do so for the love of games. So,
Studio made their game because they wanted to make a game that they wanted to play themselves. They created it because it hadn't been created before.
Okay, I'm gonna pause on every. We're going like word by word here. So a studio that made a game they wanted to play themselves and that hadn't been made before. Okay, so it's not a sequel that is just the same as the other one but kind of worse, or with no changes being made because it's an easy money, right? I would argue that in a lot of ways, some of the success of the Elder Scrolls games is because they have iterated. Even though there's Elder Scrolls 1 and 2, similar with Final Fantasy, right? The game before is not the game after. So Elder Scrolls 1 Arena was kind of decided mid-process to be what we would consider now to be like an open world RPG type game. It was not planned to be that, hence the weird title. The lore changed a lot, has changed a lot, because there was not some grand master plan of what the lore is or was going to be. With Daggerfall, a lot of iteration, a lot of changes there. Still very much the same game because of technology and what have you. And then you see with like the newer games we've seen, we could argue the different pros and cons of the steps and changes and iterations while still maintaining some of the flavor. Some games go like more heavily into that and some go less into that. So we could talk about a lot of games where the next game is like a totally Helldivers, right? Helldivers 1 was a top-down isometric view game. Helldivers 2 is not at all that, but you could still argue, it's the second one in the series. So there's different ways. If you look at other games, they keep more to that core. Civilization 6 compared to Civilization 7, or pick any civilization number compared to any other civilization number, and you're going to see how the game has changed. And we can argue, the pros and cons. But he's saying essentially like making something new, something different and I would compare this in a lot of ways to game designers being artists. And so making something new and making something original has value almost in and of itself. That is what it is all about, and not just making the same thing.
Didn't make it to increase market share. They didn't make it to serve as a brand. They didn't have to meet arbitrary sales targets or fear being laid off if they didn't meet those targets. And furthermore, the people in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue and didn't serve the game design. They didn't treat.
Yeah, so we see this all the time in modern gaming, right? The things that are put in, pain points that are put in so they can sell you the solution to it so that we can drive revenue. What he's saying here is essentially that, what game design is all about. Again, it's not that complicated. It's about making a good game and not doing things that will make the game worse for no other reason than arbitrary sales targets.
Their developers like numbers on a spreadsheet. They didn't treat their players as users to exploit. And they didn't make decisions they knew were short-sighted in function of a bonus or politics. They knew that if you put the game and the team first, the revenue will follow. They were driven by idealism and wanted players to have fun. And they realized that if the developers didn't have fun, nobody was going to have any fun. They understood the value of respect, that if they treated their developers and players well, those same developers and players would forgive them when things didn't go as planned. But above all, they cared about their game because they loved games. It's really that simple, said the Oracle. Winning Game of the Year turned out to be a life-changing event for us. It was an amazing thing. To those who will win Game of the Year 2024, you have no idea what's waiting for you. It's an incredible honor, and you're in for a heck of a ride. Now remember, should you be told to wrap it up for tonight, you can always come back next year and chat for 3 minutes, okay? So, now, to pay tribute to the nominees for Game of the Year, once again, Lorna Balf and the TGA Orchestra.
All right, I don't know if this clip goes on, but we'll pause it there. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. One of the things we often hear from developers, and I think what happens. So I'm saying developers, right? Developers is like saying it's such a broad topic as to almost not mean anything when we're already talking about the game industry kind of more generally, because people have different jobs and what have you. What you'll find typically happens, and this happens with a lot of businesses, is that if you have a evil corp, right? Evil corp being kind of a catch-all term for what you think is evil. We could argue that, but you generally get the idea. If you have an evil corp and what they want is to make a game that's going to make a lot of money. Well, how do you do that? Well, you're going to need some gamers, and you're going to need some game developers that are gamers. You're not going to be able to just grab a random person doing art and say, oh, hey, cool, now make art in this particular style with this flavor. Can they do that to some extent? Yes. Is it going to be as good as someone who's like, no, I'm really into anime. You want to make a 3D anime game? Yeah, I'm here for it. Let me show you. Like, okay, we need to do this. Here's a callback to some, to some popular anime or what have you. That's the kind of stuff you're not going to get, and that's what makes a good game. It really pushes it into that like great, amazing, the thing that all the fans love. Again, I could mention Helldivers. We see this constantly. In Helldivers, they reference a lot of popular fiction and science fiction, and so you see all those nods, and maybe you're not familiar with all of it, but it's all there, right? Like they made a Ministry of Truth. I think it was a little bit different, but basically a Ministry of Truth, and they reference 1984. Well, the book, for those who don't know, that has a Ministry of Truth, which really their job is to convince people that things that are not true are true, which is exactly what it's doing in Helldivers, right? So there's all these nods to all these different kinds of things. That's part of what you need. That's the what someone argues like a je ne sais quoi, like this ethereal quality that you really need in your game developers if you want to make a truly amazing game. Well, how do you do that if you're an evil corp? How do you convince the gamers that that you really care about the game and that you really want to make a good game. Well, what you end up needing, it's a long process, but what you end up needing is intermediaries. And so what they look for is people willing to be lied to or willing to lie to themselves, who will kind of serve as the intermediaries, who are maybe come up typically from the game development side, who are gamers themselves and can, convince themselves or can be convinced that, the sales revenue numbers really are what's important, and to kind of sell their soul is basically what happens. Now, as you might imagine, the people who come up who are, came up from the game, the gamer side, right? Who are game developers. Do you think they want to see themselves as the turncoats? Do you think they want to see themselves as the bad guy? Like, absolutely not. Right? And nobody tends to see themselves as the bad guy, period. But in this case, like, that has, so, they want to believe, right? They're like Fox Mulder. They've got the I want to believe, poster behind their monitor just above it so they can always look at it. But that is what happens. And they'll tell you that that's not what's happening and that's not who they are and what have you, but it absolutely happens. And so, with any job, this kind of thing happens. And I imagine that many of us have had jobs that we haven't liked in the past. Not everybody. But if you didn't have a lot of opportunities and you have to just take whatever jobs you can, you've probably had, or if you've been in bad situations or whatever, you've probably taken a job like that. And so I am not faulting anybody who is doing a job, the closest thing to something they love they can, and needs to provide for their family and make a living. If you are someone who would be called creative director, or someone who is at the top of whatever team there is in your company, whether that's marketing, whether that is, I don't know if like quality assurance really qualifies in most companies, but it may, I don't know, maybe it could. Probably it falls just under something else. But if you're anybody who is public facing at one of these companies, you either, you've either taken that trade off, or you're in one of these situations, right? For if you're working for an evil corp, and you're far past the point where at that point you're making enough money. You're not just working a job just to get by. Now, one could argue that as your income comes up, your spending goes up, and so you're kind of always in that situation where you need the money. But I would say that we could all probably agree that if we can find out salaries, guys, of what people make. I mean, you can look at job offerings. These people are far above the point where they're just trying to make ends meet. And so these are the people that really have a choice. Now, they might have chose to take the money to work for an evil corp and be that person. A lot of them, again, I imagine probably are lying to themselves, but that is in fact the case. And there's all kinds of things where that comes out and where that can affect the game. Just to give you an example, like a really good for instance, with monetization in games, if you have some sort of cash shop. So the thing that they want you to do, hey Nani, what's going on? So the thing that they want you to do, right, is you change real dollars for fictional currency. Now at that point, they have your money, okay? So they don't really care what you do with it. Now, what will happen when we're talking about sales targets, for example, is that let's say that we need to meet some sales target. And a sales target, remember, affects your bonus, how much you get paid, if people get laid off, and what have you. So that's what it's all about. And there's also this part you got to think. So there's the people working on the game, and then there's like the financial people and the people above them. There's different aspects to this, okay? So the person who's actually working on the game, one of the things that they might need to do is that they realize like, hey, we have a lot of excess inventory of this of our premium currency is what they call it, right? Our fictional dollars, our game cryptocurrency, right? So if we release a new thing for people to purchase, they have the currency already, and we're not going to get more real world dollars for that because there's a huge excess. So what you might do instead is you might release a new product that can't be bought with your premium currency. Maybe it's a DLC, and before there's some sort of DLCs where you could buy with this premium currency, but now you say no, you can't buy that premium currency with I'm sorry, you can't buy that DLC with a premium currency. You have to spend real world dollars. Now, that might be a good way to generate more revenue to hit your sales target. Okay. And that might be important for your bonus. It might be important for other things, but that's what you might do. Now, if you look at ESO recently, they've done something almost just like that, right? Where you could purchase the DLCs for using the premium currency that you got from your monthly subscriptions anyways, if you did that. Now, am I saying that's what happened? No. And by giving this analogy, I might be implying that that is exactly what happened. No. Do I think it's not at all a stretch that that could have happened? Yes, but I have no knowledge of that, right? So I'm not trying to imply overly so that that's exactly what happened, but I am trying to say that that exact thing does happen. And so when you see it, you kind of like, huh, that's interesting. That's just one example of how the people working on the game can change what they're doing for sales target numbers. So I'm just trying to make this real so that you understand what exactly he's talking about here. Now, another thing, just to add kind of a layer to that, is that you have the finance person. Now, it's really funny because in a lot of these like really big game companies in the US that are publicly traded, a lot of the people at the top of these companies have disdain for gamers. They think we're idiots. They think we're stupid, and they think we're wasting our time playing games. That's literally what they think. Not saying everybody, I'm sure someone's going to come back or whatever, but that is literally like a lot of them don't even play games. So if you can imagine that you're the finance person at the Evil Corp or the CEO or whatever it happens to be, and you see this happening. Now, whatever happens down here, if you want to make your sales targets because they have incentives, oftentimes with stock options. If the stock reaches a certain price, then their options are worth something and they can make a lot of money. And that's a big way that compensation in corporate companies is done with these stock options. Or it could be tied to sales figures or whatever, their bonus. It's still there. Well, or profitability, more likely. I'm sorry, profitability, not sales numbers at this level is what it would be. Well, one of the things you can do, even if this doesn't work out, even if the developers like don't change the game or they change the game but it doesn't have the effect that everybody wants, what they can instead do is say, okay, cool, let's lay off some people. Yeah, let's do that. And then they decide, well, when they start looking at who you should lay off, they're looking at numbers on a spreadsheet. That's what they're looking at. And if they look and they go, oh, these people are paid a lot. Oh yeah, if we cut 50% of this workforce, like we would make our sales number. That's literally what happens with a lot of this stuff. Like it literally is that simple. And people, they'll try to say, oh no, it's more complicated than that. And there's all kinds of other things, but it's not. Sure, there are things you could layer on that. There's some subtlety, yes. But literally, that is, how do we meet that bottom line so that I make my bonus? And when you have somebody, again, who's not that middleman, they often have disdain. Why do you care about a video game, right? Like the game they're playing is real life, and they're trying to make as much money so that they can afford that yacht, that second vacation home, that trip to Tahiti, whatever it is. That's what they're worried. That's the game they're playing. And so they're min-maxing, and they don't really care about the people beneath them. And as we talked about with most of these things, what most people do is they justify their actions. Oh, well, it's my fiduciary duty to our shareholders to make a profit. And so that's what I got to do. And so, that's my first. And if people along the way have to get fired, well, that's just what has to happen. It's not my fault, kind of thing, right? There's many different lies you could tell yourself in that situation. But that's exactly what happens. Again, these people don't consider themselves to be the bad guy. They're not the evil guy, right? They don't really realize that. And so this is the kind of thing that you see in the game industry. And then another thing that will happen. Well, hold on. I want to go back a little bit. Most briefly, let's go back before that and just pull out a couple of these other statements.
People in charge forbade them from cramming the game with anything whose only purpose was to increase revenue and didn't serve the game design.
Again, this sort of thing happens all the time where you have something put into the game that is not there to make the game more fun. It's simply made to generate revenue. I will tell you guys, you can find YouTube videos, and I've, as I've studied this stuff and cover it, I try to educate myself. You can find YouTube videos for people that they're game design classes, and there are classes and whole programs designed around teaching people how to become, game developers. And some of these classes will be taught by people who run different companies, different corporations who've made games themselves. And some of them are on what would be called gotcha games, but games, all different kinds of games, but a lot of them with horrible monetization. And the entire point of the class is to teach a new group of people how to make horrible monetization, how to keep people just engaged enough that you can keep taking their money. And along with this is psychology. That comes into play. There are companies that literally hire psychologists and sociologists to try to figure out, like, hey, how can we extract as much money as we can from these people? They're not asking, notably, they're not asking, how do we make a great game? And they're asking, how do we extract money from our customers? And what Sven is saying, and has said many times, is that it's not about extracting money. If you make a great game, you will make money. That's what you need to make a great product. And the issue here, you could argue, is not just about gaming. You could argue that this issue is more broad. How many companies that make a product that it seems to have gone from, like, how do we just make a great product that people love, to how can we extract more money out of those people? I mean, you can see this with Amazon getting packages delivered, right? It seemed like at first it was like, well, how do we provide, a convenient service for people at like a low price? That's what it was. And now it kind of feels like, well, how do we extract more money out of them? Streaming services, right? How do we provide people with a lot of entertainment at a reasonable value on something that we like? Okay, we get a bunch of streaming services. Well, how do we extract more money out of them? Well, we make the streaming services worse. We put in ads. We do other things. And that is what happens. And you can see here that it doesn't have to be that way. And there are plenty of businesses that don't run that way. And I still think that they are very profitable. The thing about this is, if you're going to do that, you have to have it's hard. It's simply, I'll just put it that way. It's just hard. If you want to run a company where you say, hey, we're just going to continue to make a great product, and that's how we're going to make a lot of money, it's very difficult, because you have to have people that are talented, that are knowledgeable, that know what's going on. I mean, again, you could compare this to the movie industry. Movie executives have no idea what makes a great film. They cannot pick winners. They cannot pick losers. They're really bad at it. And so they figured out that, sequels do well, and they're kind of a safe bet. So if you don't really understand the industry and you just want to make money, then trying to figure out something that's a safe bet is what you do. And that's what we see in the game industry. This is why again and again and again I've said that independent games are the future of game development. And it's the only way that we're going to get truly great games. Now let's move on and take a look at some other stuff that Sven said here. And there will be a little bit of choice language here.
Oh, wow. So I thought Jason, our cinematic director, was going to pick up this award, so I didn't prepare anything. And as a matter of fact, I'm doing a talk tomorrow, so I didn't prepare anything for anything else. So I hope we're not winning anything anymore. Because otherwise it's going to be really painful. I was walking here and I said, you got to do something in case you win something, and I didn't have anything. And then the speeches here have been so good and basically stole my thunder of the things I wanted to talk about. So about stopping war and about stopping the greed, which has been fucking this thing up for so long, ever since I started.
He's talking about the greed here. I'm sorry, I'm going to let this play like I did the other one once I guess he's almost... I'm going to let this play. But I just want to say that he's pointing out that it is literally greed. I just want to point out that we've been told, no, it's not greed for a very long time. And it's nice when they just try to gaslight us, right? And that's what happens with a lot of industries. There's also this customer service trick that I learned about being in customer service and also taught people. when when someone has a problem and you don't want to fix it, okay? What you do is you tell the person all the steps you would have to do to fix the problem. Oh yeah, to do that, I would have to reach out. I can't do it. I'd have to go talk to my manager. They would have to get like special authorization to change this to the way you want. And they'll generally just repeat to you the steps they have to do. And it kind of means, oh well, like kind of like, oh well, don't bother with it then if that's what you have to do. It's like I often use restaurant analogies, right? A chef being like, oh, your steak is overcooked. Well, we would have to start over. So we would have to like re-season the steak. Then we've got to cook it to the correct temperature because you can't uncook a steak, right? And and then it's going to take however long to cook it, right? 10 minutes or whatever. It's going to be a minute, depending on how you want it cooked. The thing to say to someone when they do that, I've had this happen with car products. Of like, oh well, we'd have to, car repair shops. Oh, we'd have to do that when it was under warranty. It'd be like, oh no, well we have to do this and that, and they tell you that, and it's like, cool, go do it. Great. I don't know why you're telling me what you need to do. I mean, I'm glad that you know what you need to do. Go do it. And that's what we've had a lot with, like, oh, to make a really good game or to make it like this, we'd have to do these steps. Yeah, yeah, go do that thing. Like, cool. I'm glad you understand the problem. Just go do it.
Ever since I've been fighting with publishers my entire life, so it's like, and I keep on seeing, I keep on seeing the same mistakes over and over and over, and it's always the quarterly profits. The only thing that matters is the numbers, and then you fire everybody, and then like next year you're going to say, shit, I'm out of developers, and you're going to start hiring people again, and then you do acquisitions, and then you put them in the same loop again, and it's just been broken and broken and broken. You don't have to. You just can make reserves, slow down a little bit, slow down on the greed, be resilient, take care of the people, don't lose the institutional knowledge that's been built up in all of those people that you lose every single time, so that you have to go through the same cycle over and over and over. Right? So,
this comment, so you go through the same cycle over and over again and not losing that institutional knowledge. This is critically important. It's actually a problem we're seeing real life right now, where we're going to have a lot of loss of institutional knowledge. But what you will see in games, like we've all had this experience, right? Where you're like, oh, like, why did they do this? They tried this in the the first series of this game, or they tried this in other games like this, and don't they know that this is always a bad mechanic, or this is always a bad thing to do? And if you're going to put it in a game, you need to be very careful maybe with it. Players losing control of their character. Generally speaking, this is a bad idea. Anything that CCs your character and makes it where you can't control your character is generally bad. Now, does that mean you can't do it? And no. And does that mean that, there are no games out there that's not a core part of the game? Also no. But generally speaking, it is a bad idea you want to be very careful with having players lose control of their character during play. It feels bad, you feel helpless, it's not fun. Doesn't lead to good gameplay. If you do that, you have to do it in a very specific way. If you don't believe me, go be a Arcanist, a beam Arcanist. If you play ESO, right now in Overland, since the nerfing of the shield, it is so annoying. And the shield needed to be nerfed because it was overpowered. But there are so many mechanics in ESO that interrupt you that it gets really annoying after a while. And that's why they made the shield so big when the class was first released. I would imagine they did some playtesting and they figured out that, hey, it's super annoying and people aren't going to like this, so we need to do something about it. So they gave them this like massive shield so you can't ever be interrupted and like be stunned. Okay, that's what they did. And then after a while, they roll it back because it was broken, and maybe now people won't notice or it'll be okay. I don't know. It's pretty annoying, but yeah, it's not the end of the world. It would have gotten more heat had it been like that at release. So there are a lot of things. That's one example. Again, what I'm trying to do with a lot of this, guys, is give you specific examples so you understand what everybody's talking about here. So that, when we're talking about institutional knowledge, these are just, a handful of things to give you there. Trust me, there's plenty more. Is what I'm trying to tell you. Don't think that just because I'm giving you one example that's it. I'm just giving you one specific. So that institutional knowledge is lost, and that's why you see the same mistakes being made with a lot of different games. It's also it leads to some of the people. Let's say you're an artist and you want to work in game development or a writer or any number of other things. I have some friends who are writers. That's why I thought about that. Um, and you want to work in games. It's hard. And if you work for a year and a half, 4 years, whatever it is, and then a game is put out and they no longer need you, hey, we've made most of the art assets. We're cutting half the team. And guess what? We're cutting everybody that's in this part of the world are kind of arbitrarily, or that's at this office. We're going to dissolve that. We have multiple offices, so your job is gone. Whatever it happens to be, something arbitrary. You're out of a job. Well, what do you do? Well, if you're a talented artist, you could probably go get a job doing a lot of other things that isn't game design. And so that's probably what you'll do. And are you going to take another job doing the same thing? If you're a writer, you love to write, sure, but now your job is gone and they don't need, we're going to put out some DLCs, but we don't need this massive story written and we don't know what we're going to work on next. I could pay your salary for the next 6 to 9 months while we figure that out, even if it's only 3 months, or I could just fire you and get somebody else whenever we need them. Well, again, if you're that CEO that only cares about the bottom line, or if you're that turncoat dev, that's what you're going to do. You're going to be okay with that. And so that's what's going to happen. And what Sven is saying is like, no, you don't have to do that. You can build up some cash reserves so that you have money, money to fund your next game, and even fund your next game if it fails. So if your next game just doesn't hit for whatever reason, having enough cash, he's talked about that. They have done that. And so they've grown organically. Larian Studios, people feel like it's have just heard about it. That's cool. That's fine. They've been making games for decades, and they've made some really cool games for decades. Have they been as big of a hit and it maybe as good? I think some of them have been just as good, but they haven't been a hit because they didn't have the name recognition of Baldur's Gate or of Dungeons and Dragons, right? Because sequels, they're going to do well. So that's what we see happening. And I've mentioned this before, but there, just as one example, there's a Japanese studio where when they have a gap where their game is finished, they break people up into smaller teams and let them make smaller independent games, and then they sell those and maybe they make back everybody's salary, or maybe they don't. But it's just one thing they can do to help keep people on. There are many, many other things. One of the major things you could do is make sure that you have a game pipeline that you're actually looking into the future. And I get that even good companies tend to typically not do this, but it's just good management. And basically, by saying that we can't do that, it's like saying that we're bad managers and we don't know how to plan for the future. And so that's really what is going on. And Sven is just really making it clear that is indeed what's going on, right? Instead of being told, don't believe your lying eyes, he's like, no, that is exactly what is going on.
Really pisses me off. Anyway, thank you. So I do have to talk about the narrative, though.
Okay, so he goes on to say they won an award for narrative, so I guess he's going on to that. Yeah, but this is something that comes up all the time, and I really get tired of hearing about it. There are people that will agree or disagree with Sven, and I think that's that might be fair, but I think it's definitely clear that there are people. It's really funny. There are people that are at work at like failed companies or used to run a company, and they will tell you ways. There's even some here on YouTube, and it's like, cool, their background is game design. They failed at it. They failed at like running a successful company and making successful games, and they'll tell you about why the things that the companies that are making games that we don't want to play and are doing things that us as gamers hate are wrong. And or are the correct way to do it and why we're wrong. And it's kind of hilarious, to be totally honest with you. So anyways, I just wanted to talk a bit about this. Randomly enough, I did an interview with Kieran Kelly, who works for their office, I think, in the UK. The Larian Studios is based out of Belgium, if I'm remembering correctly. I think that's right. Very close to there, if not. So I had a chance. They made a tabletop game, and that's why I actually interviewed him. It's just kind of a random thing. I saw him at I saw him at a con, PAX East, I believe. Another thing about Larian and what they're planning for the future is they're not going to make Baldur's Gate 4, and they're not planning on doing DLCs. And they've talked about how like every time they try to do a DLC, it hasn't worked well for them, and that's fair. So that's part of it. I will tell you, as someone who has played a lot of the games from Larian, the Divinity series, for example, although not like the first one, which wasn't a TTRPG, or wasn't like a TTRPG kind of style RPG. Um, their previous game versions were actually, in my opinion, they had better features. Some of the features were better, is what I want to say. The game was not as developed. The storyline was not as good and as crazy. And again, I think that's why a lot of people like the storylines, the voice acting, everything else along with that, the options you have. But the actual core mechanics of the game were better in the Divinity Original Sin. As a, for instance, so there's a lot of combos you could do. Like you could, rain was a spell, so you could cast rain, and you're like, well, what does rain do? And you're like, nothing. It makes the ground wet. Well, then you could electrify the ground, similar to what you can do in Baldur's Gate 3, and it would shock everybody. That's super cool. Well, you could take a spell book that you would have to learn, and it was rain, and you could take something that had to do with maybe creating earth or something, and you could combine those two, and you could rain oil down. Well, then you could light the oil and it explodes. I'm making that one up, guys. I don't remember if you could do that exactly, but that is the kind of combat system they had. They also had action points, which I think worked really well. Plenty of other things. I think that the reason that they're not making Baldur's Gate 4 and they're not making any expansions for Baldur's Gate 3, I think there's several reasons. I don't think you can hear Sven. You can hear what he's like as a person. This is someone with integrity who cares about games and wants to make great games. D&D is owned by Hasbro, who has been absolutely horrible to their community in recent years, and only cares about money. I don't think that Sven wants to work with Hasbro. I'm going to be honest with you, and you know, I think that you can see how an evil corp turns a game that could be great into something that's not so great. I also think that they can make a better system than just using D&D. And so that's what they're probably going to do with the next game that they make. So to kind of circle around, you know, we started this with like, is what Sven has to say, is he some, you know, unique person, or is he a lot like the rest of us? And is that not why what he has to say really resonates with us? I mean, I think that he's, in many ways that we're talking about today, he kind of sounds like an average gamer, right? Don't put garbage monetization in. Don't treat your customers or employees like garbage or like something, you know, some resource to be extracted, and you want to squeeze every bit you can out of them. Whether that's your developers having to work long hours and crunch for a product to come out instead of hiring more people or taking more time, you know, everything about what he has to say along these things just sounds to me like the average gamer. And while I do think that what Larian has is special, and I think that they find people that are like-minded, the thing again is that many people have, if given time and opportunity and the ability, they will show you that they have something special to offer. And while that is unique for each person, I think that that's the situation with Sven and with his team. I think, yes, they're very talented. Clearly, they're, you know, some of the best at what they do. But I don't think that they're unique. And I think that we need to realize Sven has been doing this. He's been talking about battling with publishers, you know, for which will often set and want those kind of things in your game to make sure it'll make more money, because that's typically how they'll make more profits. He's talked about battling with them for years. You know, you could argue that Larian labored somewhat in obscurity for years and years. And this is, again, and I'll keep saying this, why I'm so interested in independent games is because, you know, I'm going to do an interview in a I think a week or two. I can't recall. Oh no, actually maybe it's like 3 or 4. Anyways, I'm going to do an interview with a upcoming company. This company made a game, and it's a small indie game. This company does work for very large companies like Apple, like Google, and what have you. And they're programmers, I would imagine, who who make a product that is very useful for these very large companies, and they also made a game. Okay. And what we see there is that you can they could make more money just working for these larger companies making a product. Let me use a different example here to make this more clear, without where I don't have to kind of tiptoe around what I can say. Let me put it this way: if you are a really good programmer and you're really good at coding, you could make so much more money going to work for a large tech company than you could working for a game development company. That's just the way it is. And if we treat people, the reason a lot of people will even do it is because they love games. And they just want to do something that they enjoy. If they can make a livable wage, then they're happy to do it. The situation is that if we treat them like garbage, they're just going to go to the thing that will pay the most money, because if I'm going to get treated like garbage, I'd rather making 2 or 3 times what I'm making now, where I can afford, vacations and, pay for kids to go to college and not worry about financial distress, right? That's just the obvious thing that will happen. And so along the line, besides, so along the way, we need to, treat these people as game development companies need to treat these people better if they want them to stay. And for so long, game companies, these large publicly traded companies, they still continue to abuse gamers that are working for them because they know they're doing it for the love of the game. And what we as consumers have to do is show to those people that there are opportunities at indie studios and there are opportunities with indie games that, and make that more viable and have more success stories with people like Sven. And also see that, listen, I hope that Sven never sells Larian to one of they people have offered, I think there's been, talks. They want to buy him out. And why? Because they want to buy what they have. And then they're going to take everything that's good about it and they're going to ruin it. And maybe they'll put out a couple of good games and then they're going to start putting out garbage. We've seen this over and over again in the games industry. We have to put a stop to it and not fall for that. And we also have to continue to support the people like Sven. I mean, look at his hair. It's white, okay? He's not a spring chicken. We got to support the younger, up and coming game developers, game companies that are trying to make good products. And if they do make a good product at whatever scale it is, let's show them some love and allow them to continue to grow and grow a team and be able to make better and better games. I've talked about this with Nine Dots, is a studio that I really like. I'll tell you this about Nine Dots. I disagree fundamentally with their CEO's game design philosophy, not in how to make a good game, not like in monetization or something like that, but in what he considers a good game. To me, are things that I don't like. I would disagree with him on many of his points. I still recommend Nine Dot Games if you like the kind of games that they're trying to make. I just don't like the kind of games that they're trying to make most of the time. I still want to play their games and show people, because I think for those who do like that style of game, it's great. And I also really like that the ethics that they have at that company. And they are also working on publishing other games besides the ones that they just make, because publishers can be so horrible and can be so evil. And again, that's what we need to do as gaming consumers. Now, listen, if you're the average gaming consumer, all this is should be news to you. You've never heard most of this. That's cool, guys. I'm not trying to send you out on a research project, okay? What I'm trying to do instead is just cover those games. And all I'm asking, the only thing I would ask of you as someone who's watching this, is if you see a cool game that you like, that's an independent game, consider buying it and consider telling your friend about it if you think your friend might like it. That's it. That's it. That's all you got to do. And if you don't like it, don't buy it. Okay? And if you buy it on Steam and then you realize you don't like it, you've got a little bit of a window there. And the other thing is, a lot of these independent game companies will put out free demos that you can try to see if you like, and just try other games. I know that 50% of the audience here, because I polled you guys, have told me that you don't play anything else besides ESO, a lot of the time because you don't have time. Now, again, guys, I'm not trying to guilt you or anything else about that. Do whatever you want. Absolutely. Do whatever makes you happy. Uh, the thing I would warn you about, and I need to warn you because these game companies will prey on you. Okay, they're trying to extract money from you. They don't care about you as a consumer. They don't care about you as a gamer. And so I wouldn't be doing my job as your friend if I didn't warn you. Okay, all right. I need to warn you that one of the tactics that they do is that they make their games intentionally grindy so that you can't play anything else. You don't have time. And you might get this impression, I certainly know I have, where I felt like I don't have time to play other games, and other games must also require this same level of investment. I'm here to tell you that's not true. There are plenty of games out there that don't require you to grind for hours and hours doing things that you don't even enjoy to be able to finally get to the thing that you do enjoy. And so I just want to encourage you and warn you that games do that. These game companies, these CEOs, these corporate people, they don't care about you. They will absolutely do that. And so you just got to realize that is a thing that will happen and they will do. All right. Well, I think that is enough here. Why don't we switch over and talk a little bit about Civ 6, Civ 7, and we're going to talk about some cheating issues and some stuff that's going on with Civ 6 and 7. I also want to talk with this, just to kind of lead into it. I want to talk about this because I think that there'll be some related things to this topic. All right. I guess I'll leave it at that. Let me just give me a second here on YouTube to redirect everybody, and then we'll pop back. I would love to hear in the comments, guys, if you have questions, comments on this as we're kind of slowly transitioning, and we can answer them and talk about it a bit more between ourselves before we switch over. All right. I'm going to kick you guys over now, and we'll be right back on YouTube.